Guess the most powerful object ever made by human beings. Not this. Not this either. It's this. Once every 4 years, roughly 1.5 billion people arrange their entire day around it. That is a crowd large enough to overthrow any government on Earth. Nothing in the world unites this many people. It moves more human beings across more countries than any government, army, or religion ever has. More than a century ago, Friedrich Nietzsche looked at crowds like this and wrote, "In individuals, madness is rare. In groups, it is the rule." Nietzsche died before the first World Cup was ever played. And then another great mind, George Orwell, warned us about sport itself. Serious sport is war minus the shooting. But both of them suspected the problem ran deeper than either could unravel on his own. So, we brought these two minds together and asked them one question. Billions of people organize their entire lives around a ball. Why?
Because they cannot organize their lives around themselves. That is the short answer. The longer one takes us somewhere uglier. I watched it happen in Bayreuth at Wagner's Opera House. Thousands of educated Germans, weeping together in the dark, dissolved, gone, surrendered into one enormous feeling like a drop of water into the ocean. They called it art. It was anesthesia. Football does the same thing faster and cheaper. A man walks into a stadium as a single frightened animal and walks out believing he was part of a lion, but the lion never existed. Tomorrow he is a single frightened animal again, and the ticket costs more each year.
I've heard that kind of analysis before, Friedrich, usually from people who've never been inside a stadium or a factory. I spent 2 months in lodging houses in the north of England. The beds smelled of old sweat, and the food was grey. The men who lived there worked shifts that started before light and ended after dark. Saturday afternoon was the one window. That was when they went to the match. You call it anesthesia. I watched their faces. Something switched on. For 90 minutes they were loud and alive and visible in a world that treated them like furniture the rest of the week. You say they can't organize their lives around themselves. I'd say their lives didn't leave them much to organize around. Your diagnosis blames the patient for the disease.
I don't blame the patient, Orwell. I describe the condition, and the condition is older than football, older than Wagner, older than Rome. Humans are herd animals. Say this plainly and people flinch, but watch any stadium, and the proof writes itself. A goal is scored, strangers embrace, a foul is committed. 50,000 people scream the same insult at the same second. That is not individual response, that is reflex, herd reflex. The same instinct that sends starlings wheeling into formation. The herd does not seek truth, George. The herd seeks warmth, any warmth. A church, a rally, a stadium. The shape of the building doesn't matter. What matters is the dissolution, the moment the I disappears and the we floods in to replace it.
Nietzsche, you keep describing this as something that happens naturally, like weather. It doesn't just happen. Someone builds the stadium. Someone picks the schedule. Someone sells the broadcast rights. I wrote a short essay in 1945, and the line that stuck was, "Serious sport is war minus the shooting." People quote it as metaphor. I meant it plain. In 1969, qualifying matches between Honduras and El Salvador sparked an actual armed conflict, 100 hours of fighting. In 1978, Argentina hosted a World Cup while running torture centers blocks from the stadiums. Survivors described hearing the crowd celebrate goals from inside their cells while they were being electrocuted. The game didn't create those horrors, but it was the noise that covered them. The need may be natural, Friedrich. The people who channel that need have plans.
The exploitation is real, I grant you that, but the exploitation is a late arrival. It is a parasite that found a host. The host was already there. You brought up your novel, The 2 Minutes Hate. Citizens gathering before a screen, raging at the image of an enemy, then filing back to their desks as if nothing happened. Yes?
Yes.
The stadium is that ritual. Voluntary. That is what should terrify you more than any dictator. Your 2 minutes hate was imposed. A screen switched on, and people obeyed because they were afraid. But the fan, nobody forces the fan. He buys the ticket himself, paints the banner himself, teaches his own children the chants. He adjusts his work schedule, rearranges his holidays, counts down the days. The Roman emperors had to build the Colosseum and stock it with lions. The modern version requires nothing. The subjects build their own arena, supply their own rage, and call it the best day of their lives. You wanted to know why the ball works? That's why. It is the only instrument of control in history that the controlled population maintains, funds, and defends with genuine passion.
And that is exactly what I showed in the book, though people remember the wrong half. They remember the telescreens and the torture and Room 101. They forget the proles. 85% of the population. The party barely bothered to watch them. The proles had the lottery, had football, had cheap gin, had tabloids full of crime and sensation. Nobody tortured them. Nobody needed to. They were already occupied. The scariest thing I wrote was never the boot stamping on a human face. It was the ordinary people who were perfectly free and never once used that freedom to ask a single dangerous question. They didn't need to be oppressed. They just needed to be busy.
Of all the objects in human history, why did the ball become the one that captured billions?
Now there is a question worth chewing on. The ball is genius because it is empty, a sphere. No face, no flag, no inscription. It belongs to no civilization. Every child on every continent in every century kicked something round, a stone, a skull, a bundle of rags. And because the ball carries no meaning of its own, you can pour anything into it. Paint a flag on it, now it is the fatherland. Place it at a striker's feet, he becomes a god for 90 minutes. Sink it into a net, a nation weeps. I said God is dead, I stand by it. But the hunger that built God, that hunger is alive and starving. The stadium is the new cathedral, the scarf is the rosary, and the ball is the host at communion, sacred because the faithful are desperate, not because the wafer deserves worship.
What makes it dangerous is simpler than that. You can argue with a flag, you can refuse a slogan, you can see a propaganda poster for what it is because it announces itself. It says, "Believe this." But a ball looks like play. It looks like childhood. It looks like something you picked up freely in a park when you were 7 years old. You can't rebel against your own happiness. That is why a ball moves more people than any army. A flag says, "Fall in line." A ball says, "Come play." And playing feels like your own idea.
What does the ball activate in people once they're inside the stadium?
A confusion between two things your species cannot tell apart, patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism is love of an actual place, the smell of rain on the street where you grew up, the accent of your city, your mother's cooking. That love needs no opponent. It sits quietly inside you and asks nothing of anyone else. Nationalism is something else entirely. It is attachment to a crest, a jersey, a color, an abstraction that only comes alive when there is someone to beat. When his team loses, the nationalist feels humiliated in his own body, as though 11 strangers failing to kick a ball into a net somehow made him less of a man. That has nothing to do with loving a country. That is a hungry ego borrowing a symbol because its own life is too small to feed it.
And the proof shows up the morning after. When a country wins the World Cup, strangers who've never exchanged a word hug in the streets. Genuine emotion, real tears. Then the sun comes up and they go back to ignoring each other on the bus. The feeling was real, but it rested on a result, not a relationship. The result changes, the brotherhood vanishes. I saw the same thing in the Blitz, actually. People were generous and kind and united while the bombs were falling. The moment the bombing stopped, the class walls went straight back up. Something about shared intensity makes people feel bonded, but the bond doesn't survive ordinary life. That should tell us what it was actually built on.
The emotions in stadiums are clearly real. People weep, they scream, they embrace strangers with a feeling that surprises even them. What is that?
Something very old, older than language. I called it the Dionysian, the drive to dissolve your boundaries into something larger than yourself. Before philosophy, before writing, there were drum circles and fire dances, bodies moving as one, the wall between you and the person beside you, gone. That ecstasy is genuine. It may be the most honest thing humans ever feel. The Greeks built their entire theater around it. The chorus moved as a single body. The audience was swept into a current that drowned out their separateness, and for a few hours, the unbearable weight of being one lonely skull was lifted. But here is the difference. The Greek walked out of the theatre of Dionysius carrying something. He was cracked open, changed. The modern fan walks out and checks his phone. Same ecstasy, emptied of consequence. A pressure valve that resets every weekend, so you never build up enough force to actually change your life.
Yes, people need to feel part of something bigger than their own lives. They always have. Religion used to do it. Village festivals, the harvest, the local wedding where the whole town came. Then the factories broke the villages apart. The cities turned neighbors into strangers. The churches emptied. And football walked straight into the gap. It offered everything that had been ripped away. Ritual, belonging, identity, the feeling that your existence mattered to the stranger beside you. The people who cry in stadiums are answering a real hunger. Their tears are honest. What keeps me up is that the hunger was manufactured by the same economy that now sells them the relief.
Let me take this further than you'd like. Look at what the stadium actually does with all that honest feeling. A man walks in carrying real anger. Maybe his wages haven't moved in years. Maybe his landlord is bleeding him. Maybe he suspects somewhere in the back of his mind that the entire arrangement of his life is built to keep him manageable. Inside the stadium for 90 minutes, he is permitted to rage. He screams. He insults. He threatens a referee who can't hear him. He feels powerful. Then the whistle blows. He files out, gets the train, goes to work Monday and says nothing to his boss. Every drop of rebellion that might have driven him to question his conditions vented through 90 minutes of approved screaming. The Caesars built the Colosseum to achieve what a fixture list now does for free.
And the people running this particular fixture list aren't even hiding anymore. FIFA has had its presidents indicted, its votes bought with cash in envelopes, its tournaments handed to countries that built stadiums with migrant workers dying in the heat. Everybody knows. Documentaries get made, journalists win prizes for exposing it, and the opening match still pulls 2 billion viewers. A man could know everything about how corrupt the system is and still feel a lump rise in his throat when his national anthem plays before kickoff. That is the trick nobody has ever pulled off before. You can despise the thing that moves you and be moved anyway, because the feeling it puts inside your chest is more real to you than your own objections. Try finding a dictator in history who managed that.
You both agree on the mechanism, but you clearly disagree about the people caught inside it. Can ordinary people see through this?
Some, not many. And here is why. Take the fan and strip football from his life entirely. What fills the space? His own thoughts. The long evening with no match to anticipate, no result to argue about, no tribe to wear. The question of what his 40 years on this earth have actually amounted to. Most people cannot sit in that room, George. I am not guessing. I sat in that room, alone in boarding houses in Turin and Sils Maria, nearly blind, writing books almost no one bought. The silence of your own existence without costume or distraction. It is a sound most people will do anything to avoid hearing. Anything. Even painting their face and screaming at a ball.
I know you mean that honestly, but it leads to a place where every tyrant in history has already been standing. Every government that decided to manage its population started from that same thought. They can't handle the silence, so let's fill it for them. Every propaganda ministry, every bread and circus program, every rigged spectacle begins with your assumption. I met the people you're diagnosing, Friedrich, in Spain, miners from Asturias who'd never read a book, carrying rifles they barely knew how to use, walking toward a fascist position because they believed a better world was possible. A sniper put a bullet through my throat, and the man who dragged me out of the ditch was a farmer with dirt under his nails. You're heard, and I'm alive because of him.
A brave man. I will not take that from him. But the war he fought ended in betrayal. The revolution ate itself. Spain got 40 years of Franco. Your farmer's courage was real. What came of it? This is what you will not face. The exceptional moment does not redeem the ordinary pattern. Your farmer goes home, and within a year he is inside some new structure of belonging. A party, a union, a local club. Because that is what humans do. They nest. You tear down one nest, and they build another before the week is out. You call it resilience. I call it the rhythm of an animal that cannot survive without a flock.
Or maybe he just likes having mates.
What?
Maybe a man joins a football club or a union or a church because being alone is miserable and company is decent. You keep reaching for the grand diagnosis, herd instinct, existential terror, the dissolution of self. Maybe the truth is plainer than we'd like. People are lonely. Football helps. The question worth asking isn't whether the patient is a sheep, it's who profits from the loneliness and who profits from selling the cure.
Someone is watching this right now who sees exactly what you are describing, the emotional engineering, the manufactured belonging, and they feel clever for seeing it. What would you say to them?
I would say, be careful. You have just joined the most exclusive and the most pathetic herd there is, the herd of one. You watch the man in the jersey and feel a little smile forming. You think, I see what he does not. I am awake. He is captured. No, you have traded one drug for another. His drug is belonging. Yours is contempt. His wears off by Monday. Yours never does, because you refresh the dose every time you see someone enjoying something you've decided is beneath you. You feel clarity? Clarity that produces nothing but a sneer at another person's joy is not clarity. Go and build something that makes the stadium unnecessary for even one person. Until then, your insight is decoration.
I knew men like that in London, intellectuals who could explain every mechanism of working-class oppression and had never once shared a meal with a working-class family. They looked at the bloke on the terrace with his scarf and his pie and saw a case study. The bloke on the terrace looked back at them and saw exactly what they were: lonely men who turned their loneliness into a theory. The smartest person in the room who has no mates is not actually smarter. He just has fewer people to tell him when he's being a fool. Seeing through the trick and feeling clever about it, that is a smaller room than any stadium, and the seats are worse.
So, we have described the trap, described the people inside it, and described the people who believe they have escaped it. Is there an actual way through?
I think so, but it won't make a very dramatic book for either of us. You watch the match, you feel everything: the surge when the ball hits the net, the fury at the referee, the strange love you have for 11 strangers who happen to wear your colors. You let it happen, and somewhere quiet, behind all the noise, you keep one eye open. Not a searchlight scanning for propaganda, just one eye. You notice the acceleration in your own chest. You notice the urge to hate the opposing side. You notice how good it feels to disappear into the crowd. And you let yourself feel it without handing yourself over completely. That's all. No revolution, no grand refusal. Just a man who is inside the stadium and knows where he is.
A modest proposal, almost disappointingly modest from the man who wrote the century's most frightening novel. But I wonder if either of us earned the right to give that advice. I told the world to become the Übermensch, to stand alone, create your own values, overcome the herd. Then I collapsed on a street in Turin, threw my arms around a horse that was being whipped, and never wrote another clear sentence. You told the world to stay awake, resist the screen, refuse the slogan. You died at 46, coughing blood in a sanatorium, watching your own government build pieces of what you'd warned about. We both understood the trap perfectly, George. Perfectly. And it swallowed us anyway. Knowing the name of the cage has never once been the same thing as walking out of it.
No, it hasn't. But it's a start. And starts are what ordinary people are good at. Better than either of us, maybe. We tried to see the whole picture, and it broke us both. The man in the stadium only needs to see the part of the picture that has his own face in it, and keep looking, even when the crowd is at its loudest, and it would be so much easier to close his eyes and sing along.
Easier. Yes, it would always be easier.
That's how you know it matters.
Thank you.